Hello and welcome back, and today I want to do a software overview and partial review of the DS220j. Released at the closing of February 2020, this is the latest generation of their budget 2-bay NAS series. Now, for the more astute of you on the screen here, you may notice that although we're looking at the DS220j, I also have a DS420j here in the studio as well. This is for a follow-up video as well, and they are going to be very, very similar. So my advice to you is if you're watching this video to get an idea of what a more budget DSM powered NAS looks like, then you probably don't need to watch both of them. But I do advise otherwise, if you're looking at a specific NAS, then maybe check out the appropriate video for that, because there'll be a lot of crossover and there'll be things I'm going to mention obviously in both videos. But today I want to focus on the 220j just because of the two, it's probably the more popular of the two of them in this J series at the moment of release, because the J series from Synology has always been the more cost-effective NAS solution. It gives you a little taster of all the things that Synology and their DSM platform can give you, but at the same time doesn't tax your wallet too much. So if you're making the first tippy toes into the world of network attached storage, maybe you've been using DropBox for a while, maybe you've been using Google Drive and stuff like that, or maybe you have a bigger NAS that you have to back up onto another NAS to add another prong to your backup strategy. This is where a J series NAS can really come into its own, because although it's not designed to be a powerhouse device, it still gives you a decent kind of entry-level access to what Synology NAS is putting out there these days. Now, I am going to be using OBS today, so there might be a dip in frame rate from time to time, and I apologise in advance. But without further ado, let's make our way into this NAS. Now, I've had this device powered up for literal minutes, just to give you guys a good idea of what this device is like to use in a raw world environment. I've also only set the device up around about half an hour ago with a couple of drives inside that are independent storage areas. We're not going to be using RAID here because I want to make sure I make a video that's kind of relatable to everyone. And if I'd gone ahead and made a RAID of 2 drives inside, I know a number of you like to use a budget NAS like this with drives independent, no RAID included. If we make our way into the control panel, we can look at the device. It's going to advanced mode, and there's lots of information here in the control panel that lets you navigate your NAS and also set the device up for the first time. So what I'm going to be doing during the course of this video is showing you guys what I would do to set up this device for the first time, and moreover give you guys an idea of how responsive this NAS is. I'm going to try to include everything, warts and all, while going through this to give you guys an idea of, particularly keeping an eye down there on the RAM, just how good or bad the DS220j is for your needs. So when setting up a NAS for the first time, the first thing you need to do is make sure your storage is set up appropriately. In more budget series NASs, it will often by default set up any media inside the NAS as an SHR. I've made sure to avoid that option, but it's up to you how you want to set it up for the first time. And what I've done is introduced 2 hard drives inside this device and created 2 storage pools with 1 storage pool on each drive. I've even gone as far as to include both a Seagate Iron Wolf NAS hard drive and a WD Red NAS hard drive to give you guys an idea that not only are both supported, but hopefully, where possible, give you ideas of contrast between them. For example, on a WD drive, we've got information here where we can go and find out more information about the drive, and we can do smart tests, which can be done periodically on a schedule or as and when you need them. These will check the drive for inconsistencies and bit faults. On top of that, if you go to the Seagate drive, you can of course access the same things, but also get access to Seagate Iron Wolf Health Management, which I'm going to go into a lot more detail in a follow-up video, but it's still great that that feature is available even on a low-tier NAS like the DS220j. As mentioned, try to keep an eye on the resource consumption throughout this video here. I'll even move it slightly more in screen to make sure you can see it, because this is where the kind of limitations of a J series NAS will become apparent, because memory relates to the number of tasks you do simultaneously or the number of users accessing a device at any given time. Consequently, this RAM consumption on a NAS that arrives with a frankly low amount of memory by default, if we go to the info center here, you can see that we arrive with half a gig of memory. So we're already using over 256 megabytes of memory here, probably a little bit more, while utilizing just simply accessing the storage manager. There's nothing intensive happening. We've already used half the memory just running this device. Now, we've got the drives installed. Next, I created individual storage pools, with each drive acting as its own independent area. Now, I should highlight that you should never utilize mixed drives in a NAS unless you absolutely have to. And the only reason I'm using mixed drives in this scenario is just to give you guys, where possible, a bit of contrast between WD Red and Seagate Ironwolf where appropriate. After you've created your storage pool, which is effectively the area of storage that's all RAIDed from your drives, you can then create multiple volumes. And these volumes are where all of your data, your apps, and more can and will live. I've created 2 separate volumes here, and as you can see, because the drive is larger on the Seagate, we are utilizing a lot more space being available. We're also optimizing the file system on the Seagate drive, which is also adding to that memory consumption utilization, but not a vast amount. If we go into the resource monitor, we'll be able to see what exactly that memory is being consumed by. We can go into the processes and then list these processes by what they're utilizing. So we can look at the massive consumption of memory, and right now we can see that typical Synology processes are what's eating the lion's share of that memory consumption. And indeed, we can go into more information detail here to tell us more about memory utilization overall, how much is being cached and how much is being buffered and reserved. Moving forward, we can now move away from typical storage allocation to file access and sharing. Creating shared folders and creating new drives is actually surprisingly fast. We've got data already pre-installed and folders already pre-created by the file system for our data. If we want to create a new folder, it is simply a case of creating a folder here and adding new folder if we so choose, and it's as simple as that. Now, we are utilizing this device over the network, so it's worth highlighting that if you are accessing the NAS remotely over the internet, things may not be quite as responsive. If we open up a brand new folder on my NAS, we go to my Documents folder, find an individual photo or video. It's as simple as this to add files to your device if you so choose. You can do that with photos, video, indeed any file type. But of course, the size of the file will dictate how long it takes to upload. You can create shared folders, with shared folders allowing you to not only create a folder that can be shared over the network or the internet, but can also be used to share locally on your connected device, such as my Windows PC here. So for example, I'm creating a shared folder here, which I can choose to encrypt if I want, but performance will dip if I do. Click Next, and from here, I'm creating this new shared folder. Now, a shared folder, as mentioned, can be accessed over the network or the internet, but it's when you access it utilizing third-party operating systems like Mac and Windows where its true utility can be shown. So for example, right now I'm enabling that both admins and guests can access this new shared folder. This shared folder, which is now available along with all the other folders, can be accessed via the network and the internet if I so choose. I can share it with key people. I can create folders within this folder. So a new folder here, we'll call this one Share 1. And this folder we can then share if we choose with any user who we give the link to or we email information to. You can even use 3D barcodes if that's what their system has adopted. But the real cool thing is when you use something like Synology's Assistant software, which is the setup software to add a NAS for the first time, head over to the drive, right click and click Map Network Drive. Now, as mentioned, if we go into that PC folder there, we can see my local drive there and nothing more. If, however, we log in to the NAS via the Synology Assistant panel, like so, it will connect to the NAS, and as we can see, there's our shared folder. Click the shared folder, click Next, and then assign a letter of the alphabet. In this case, we're going to go with S. Then I click Next, ask me to authenticate the information, and then we go back down to where we created the PC folder there, and boom, there is our shared folder and the shared file we created. So now we're accessing the NAS using our own proprietary file browser, and this can be utilized in Windows, in Mac, in Android and more. And as we've also seen, the utilization is still not too high. So despite my reservations about 256 megabytes of memory, we do still seem to be having steady file access. The next thing we want to talk about is those apps, because that's one of the main reasons most people will utilize a Synology NAS. Synology has a huge reputation in the field of network attached storage, and a lot of that is down to their vast investment in their software. So for example, with this Synology NAS here, we can access quite a lot of apps. There's even some apps that I'm surprised are supported, such as Hyper Backup, which is a great backup tool to back up across multiple platforms from NAS to NAS to NAS to USB, from NAS to cloud, and I'll go into that shortly. We've even got Hyper Backup Vault, CMS software, Synology Chat, Synology Surveillance, and some great options readily available even on a budget NAS like this. However, there are some apps that aren't present, such as Virtual Machine Manager, Active Backup Sync, and these are because they are vastly more demanding apps. But one app I did see there that's impressive is the inclusion of Plex Media Server. And Plex Media Server on a NAS like this is going to be both impressive and worrying. Impressive because it means home users that are utilizing this for their media streaming to TVs, home consoles and more have now got access to installing this app. It's worrying because Plex Media Server is a hungry beast of an app, and I don't know if it's going to be a smooth enough experience to run Plex Media Server on the 220j. But to install apps, just click the install button. And from here, it will ask you to say where you want the app installed. So there's our two folders from earlier, two volumes and storage areas from earlier. We're going to go with the WD there, click Next, and then we're going to install the application. And that's how easy it is to install an app. It happens in the background, and it will need to download files from the Synology server, or in some cases, third-party servers. There are so many apps ready to go off the bat. We've even got access to Synology Moments and Synology Drive, two great applications for not only tagging photo media, but also giving you a one-portal access point to your data that is intuitive and organic to the way you use your NAS. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on individual apps because I've created individual videos on almost all of these apps. But, as mentioned, I'm definitely going to look at Hyper Backup. The reason I'm going to look at Hyper Backup primarily is because a budget NAS can be utilized not only for first-time NAS users that are wondering about the investment in NAS, and a cost-effective J-Series NAS will often be a great choice because despite its low price, it does give you quite a lot from Synology. On top of that, if you use the device in a year or two down the line, feel you're hitting a glass ceiling, you can get past it because you haven't spent too much on the initial investment and therefore can buy another NAS. But then, what do you do with the old NAS? Same goes for if you've got a powerful NAS and you need to back up. What do you do with the second NAS? And that is where Hyper Backup lives. Hyper Backup allows you to create backup schedules and backup tasks from folder to folder to volume, from NAS to NAS, and whole storage area to whole storage area within this tool. All of the options are already present, with the ability to synchronize different NASs on the local area network very, very easily, as well as cloud platforms, third-party cloud platforms, such as popular ones you've already heard of, and NAS to NAS backups with third-party NASs from companies like QNAP, Acerstore, TerraMaster, Netgear, and more, using rsync and other tools. There are loads of options ready to go off the back, and I've got a whole dedicated video to Hyper Backup featuring these two NASs coming very soon. Moving forward from this, while I'm running out of air there, because that was a hell of a long sentence, we can look at other tools ready to go. We've got Download Station that allows you to create RSS download links and download your podcast as well as files via HTTP, BT, NZB, FTP, any of the regular download schedules where you want to download loads of files. Just do me a favor, guys, and stay legal. From here, we can create a destination for our download folders. So if we go for this and call this one downloads rather unimaginatively, we've now got a downloads folder for Download Station to work with. You can search for URLs and files at the top, or integrate files directly into this by adding RSS feeds, BitTorrent downloads, and more all here. And I've got dedicated videos to talk you guys through how to do that. So, what other application should you care about on a default budget NAS like this? Well, Synology Drive is a hell of a tool. Synology Drive gives you two things. One, it gives you a one portal access point to your data via a web link that's similar to that of Google Drive and Dropbox and more. It can open all the files you need using Synology Office, and if you're going to utilize it in a team building exercise, it's hugely beneficial. Think about the applications you use every single day for your business. Perhaps you use Skype or WhatsApp to communicate. Perhaps you use Outlook or Google Calendar or Google Mail or Google Docs to handle all of your files. All of those tools use third-party servers with your data being shared on other platforms. Synology provides you lots of applications that allow you to handle all of your data internally and locally, which means you can use the Synology Office application to open docs, PDFs, spreadsheets, PowerPoint files, and more, all from the Synology Office local app. And this can be utilized both on your local client PC or Mac machine and via the web browser. The same goes for Synology Chat Server, which acts as a client download application for PC, Mac, iOS, and Android, as well as in the web browser to have conversations with other Synology users on your NAS, exchange files, and update your respective calendars. Now, we've already hit one of the early stumbling blocks, as you can see, with the CPU and memory utilization spiking there. Installing bigger applications and multitasking is where we're going to start to see the hardware of the DS220j start to struggle. You can see a huge spike of utilization there, and this is because this is not a NAS designed for multitasking. Don't get me wrong, when these apps are installed and running, they'll be fine. But it's not until they are fully installed that we will see fluidity. Because once you try to install apps while doing other tasks, you will hit stumbling blocks like this. Indeed, you can't install many apps simultaneously without the memory utilization spiking quite dramatically. So the initialization of the DS220j may seem a little slower than other NASs you may have used in the past. This is stuff that will hopefully get ironed out as you use the device further along. Right now, we're going to set as default for all the packages to install on our Seagate Ironwolf NAS hard drive. Going to click Next, and from here, we can see how long it's taking for Synology Office to be installed. It's worth highlighting that we are, of course, installing a couple of other add-ons that keep the apps running nice and smoothly in the background. Other applications that it's worth highlighting are ones like Synology Surveillance Station to create a dedicated portal of surveillance with multiple camera feeds and control via pan, tilt, zoom, and alerts, all from your Synology NAS desktop. As you can already see, not only are we installing individual apps, we've already got some apps running in the background. Remember our Plex installation? That is already open in the background. If we go to the resource monitor, we can see how our utilization has changed over time. We've got individual processes with new processes being introduced with utilization creeping up all the time. And there's Plex Media Server running in the background whilst the ad has been installed. And again, things are starting to slow down now because we are trying to do lots of things at once. And that's where half a gig of memory is really going to start to show its limitations. Making our way back to the performance monitor, which is already, with things starting already to appear a little sluggish, we can see that utilization is pretty high indeed. While we're downloading files and getting stuff set up in the background, CPU and memory utilization is already looking substantially higher, with volume and disk utilization constant because that's where our data is living. We still haven't seen the Office file install, but we can see that the background PHP apps are installed, and now we're downloading the Synology Office app. While it does that, let's take a moment to look at the control panel, because the control panel will give us a little information about how we can configure this device for the very first time. The device is still being very responsive indeed. For something that's running on half a gig of memory, ignore the fact that it seems to be sluggish. I have to give it some respect for just how well it's handling these tasks with such a small amount of memory. When setting up your device for the first time, there's a few things you're going to have to do. First and foremost, if there's more than one user accessing the device, you are going to have to create new user accounts. New users can be set up to be everyone from employees to bosses to team members to family to friends to whoever you want to have access to the NAS. Bearing in mind, of course, that this small amount of memory will largely depreciate the huge number of users that can access this device at once. You can create thousands of users, but I think with that amount of memory, if you've got more than 5 users accessing at once, you will see an enormous sluggish behavior present itself on the DS220j. Creating users is incredibly straightforward. You just create names, give them descriptions and emails. You don't have to give them an email address. You can just stick with the default if you so choose, or you can give them all individual logins as needed. To log into the device with these users, they log in just like I did at the top of the video, but you can set just how much they are allowed to see. So for example, we'll call this person Adam. We won't give them an email, and we'll give them the password, which is an awful password. But this user Adam, we can then set up just how much they can access. We can choose which apps they can access. We can choose which folders they can access. We can choose just what kind of Synology 220j files and applications they can access at any given time. We can even have it so they only have read access or read-write access or no access at all. And there you go, it's that straightforward. I skipped over slightly there, but you can also set up just how much storage individual users have got on each of the volumes that you create, or if you do one giant volume, as well as just how many permissions they have to individual apps. So for now, I'm going to give them no access to anything. And that means Adam can only access shared folders and back up his files to the NAS, but not have any ability to change anything on it. Let's see how our app installation is running, and we're still not completed there in the background. We've created our user Adam, and it's that straightforward to add users. Now, accessing the NAS is primarily done via the network. This is when you've got devices all in a home or office environment that are all using the same internet connection. There's a lot more to networks than that, but that's the easiest way to put it. But some people will want to access the NAS externally via the internet anywhere in the world. And in order to do that, you will need to set up a quick connect account for one or more users. You'll need to register a Synology account, and this will allow you to access the NAS anywhere in the world with a combination of static IPs and login domain access. But I'm not going to go through that today. That's for another video or one of the ones that I've already produced on accessing a Synology NAS over the internet. Moving back into that control panel, and again, I'm very impressed how responsive this device is. Despite its rather weaker hardware compared with other NASes, we can take a look down at some of the other options. You can alter the user interface if you choose, but most users don't. You can change privileges of active users or groups, or even individual applications themselves here, as well as accessing more technical information in the background. You can set up regional information with regards to languages and time zones, and with external device support, you can connect USB devices to your Synology NAS, such as external storage, UPSs, printers, and more, and they'll all be listed here, and you can assign individual access to users or groups as you see fit. Apart from that, there's not much more to tell you about with the DS20j. We've already talked about Hyper Backup, and there's lots of videos I've already produced on the individual applications. Overall, as far as a Synology NAS server behaves, I'd say the DS220j is a very, very impressive device for the hardware we have got available to us. Going back into that control panel, if we look at the hardware currently available to us, we can have some idea about just how well this device is working. The CPU inside this device is the RT1296, a quad-core 1.4 GHz 64-bit ARM based processor, which is pretty impressive. On top of that, with only 512 megabytes of RAM, this device is doing very well. And with this device only been running now for 27 minutes from a cold boot straight into this video, fair play. If you look at the clock at the bottom of the screen, it must be at around 22-23 minutes at least. This is an impressive performance so far. I will be doing a follow-up video on a number of the apps on this device, so we can see it's finally finished. But for now, if you are going to set this device up the first time, I strongly recommend installing the following applications. Video Station, to enjoy all of your videos and have tailored databases with graphics, trailers, cast information and more. Install Video Station. Synology Office we've already covered, with its alternatives to Google Docs and Office 365. Install Synology Chat to be able to have an alternative to WhatsApp and Skype, and install Synology Drive for localized access and file pinning, as well as a complete dedicated user interface for comparable to Dropbox, Google Drive and more. Surveillance Station, which I will be doing a dedicated video to after this, for having that control deck of cameras that you can access anywhere in the home via the network or the internet with encryption enabled. Note Station creates a shared area, a sandbox task and task manager for your user groups that can be collaborating on projects, business, or even just home stuff. And remember, Note Station, Synology Chat, Synology Drive, Synology Calendar, Synology Office, and all of the Synology Mail applications can all be integrated together for a much better workflow for you and your colleagues. There's Synology Moment and Synology Photo Station, which are different tools for handling photos on the NAS, with AI photo recognition of faces, things and more on Moment, and better cataloguing and portfolio creation on Photo Station. And of course, Download Station for handling your downloads, Hyper Backup to handle backups to and from the NAS, and Audio Station for handling your audio. There are loads of other tools that you should look at in the Synology library of apps, but overall the DS220j has responded very well to these initial software tinkerings on this NAS device, and I've got to say I'm pretty impressed by what I've seen so far. But just remember, you are hitting a glass ceiling early on. We're going to end this video by pushing that memory and the CPU to breaking point. What we're going to do is run numerous apps all at the same time, just to show you what happens. I'm going to run a whole pile of apps all at once and show its reflection on the utilization. Let's go for Plex Media Server in another tab as well. And you're going to start to see the utilization in this device spike dramatically. And that's because it's not designed to be used with lots of tools happening all at once. And again, it does still seem to be holding up well to all the things we're doing, despite its low memory. We've got these individual tabs all set up, and all of these apps here running in the background. Even Synology Moments, we can run there, and all of these tools running in the background still seem to be running moderately well. Although obviously the more we engage with them, or the more users access them, will change just how busy this NAS becomes and how well it deals with what we're doing. But overall, gotta say I'm impressed. And if you guys are interested in buying the 220j, go into the links in the description below to see my full review in terms of hardware and software from NAS Compares, as well as buy links that if you use won't cost you a penny more, and they help me keep this video and the blog alive to help you guys. But otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed this video, click subscribe to learn more, and I'll see you next time.